In economics, the principle of absolute advantage refers to the ability of a party to produce a greater quantity of a good, product, or service than competitors, using the same amount of resources. Adam Smith first described the principle of absolute advantage in the context of international trade, using labor as the only input. Since absolute advantage is determined by a simple comparison of labor productiveness, it is possible for a party to have no absolute advantage in anything. In that case, according to the theory of absolute advantage, no trade will occur with the other party. It can be contrasted with the concept of comparative advantage, which refers to the ability to produce specific goods at a lower opportunity cost. Origin of the theory. The main concept of absolute advantage is generally attributed to Adam Smith for his 1776 publication An Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of the Wealth of Nations, in which he countered mercantilist ideas. Smith argued that it was impossible for all nations to become rich simultaneously by following mercantilism because the export of one nation is another nation's import, and instead stated that all nations would gain simultaneously if they practiced free trade and specialized in accordance with their absolute advantage. Smith also stated that the wealth of nations depends upon the goods and services available to their citizens, rather than their gold reserves. While there are possible gains from trade with absolute advantage, the gains may not be mutually beneficial. Comparative advantage focuses on the range of possible mutually beneficial exchanges. Examples. Example 1. According to Figure 1, England commits 80 hours of labor to produce 1 unit of cloth, which is fewer than Portugal's hours of work necessary to produce 1 unit of cloth. England is able to produce 1 unit of cloth with fewer hours of labor, therefore England has an absolute advantage in the production of cloth. On the other hand, Portugal commits 90 hours to produce 1 unit of wine, which is fewer than England's hours of work necessary to produce 1 unit of wine. Therefore, Portugal has an absolute advantage in the production of wine. If the two countries specialize in producing the good for which they have the absolute advantage, and if they exchange part of the good with each other, both of the two countries can end up with more of each good than they would have in the absence of trade. In the absence of trade, each country produces 1 unit of cloth and 1 unit of wine. Here, if England commits all of its labor for the production of cloth for which England has the absolute advantage, England produces divided by 80 equals 2.25 units of cloth. On the other hand, if Portugal commits all of its labor for the production of wine, Portugal produces divided by 90 equals 2.33 units of wine. By exchanging the 2.25 units of cloth and the 2.33 units of wine, both of the two countries can end up with more of each good than they would have in the absence of trade. Example 2. You and your friends decided to help with fundraising for a local charity group by printing t-shirts and making bird houses. Scenario 1. One of your friends, Gina, can print 5 t-shirts or build 3 bird houses an hour. Your other friend, Mike, can print 3 t-shirts an hour or build 2 bird houses an hour. Because your friend Gina is more productive at printing t-shirts and building bird houses compared to Mike, she has an absolute advantage in both printing t-shirts and building bird houses. Scenario 2. Suppose Gina wasn't as agile with the hammer and could only make 1 birdhouse an hour, but she took a sewing class and could print 10 t-shirts an hour. Mike, on the other hand, takes woodworking and so he can build 5 birdhouses an hour, but he doesn't know the first thing about making t-shirts, so he can only print 2 t-shirts an hour. While Gina would have the absolute advantage in printing shirts, Mike would have an absolute advantage in building birdhouses.